usually isn't leading me to a bet. It's leading me to not make not make an ill-informed bet. Something along those lines.
That's a great call. And in the spirit of sharing some credit, I listened to an excellent podcast today about our friend Rob Pizzola and BetStamp Johnny, obviously competitors of BetSperts, but nonetheless, they're putting out a good podcast. And then I think Rob had a very specific point of view that I was like, hallelujah, somebody said this. And he said it in a way that I haven't really thought of it before. But he was basically like, I'm never going to bet against my numbers, but I may have an edge by my numbers that I don't bet. And this is some of the reasons why you might not. Right. Injuries, he was bringing up as kind of the key example for him. But certainly, like if I have an advantage on a team and, oops, they happen to be, third straight on the road, or oops, they happen to be in an especially disadvantaged travel situation. I'm gonna skip it. I'm gonna waive that opportunity, and that you can do just as much damage not placing a losing bet at 1.1 as you will finding a winning bet at 1.0. In fact, a little bit more. So.
Gotcha.
With all that, shall we get to the schedule?
Shall we unveil real quick before we unveil it too? If you are watching, I actually have the YouTube stream up because I wanted to look at it. If you like the new look, and I absolutely like the new look. I don't know, somebody in the chat, it should be working. I'm watching myself live on YouTube now. We had a little hiccup right there at the beginning, but if you do like the new look, obviously producer Dan has been making all these. It's looking great. Give us a thumbs up in the chat. We'll be working through a little more hiccups as we go, but I think we've got it nailed down. And by next week,
it's the preseason, guys.
It's preseason. Once we get the previews rolling here by next week, we'll be in full season form. But yeah, give us a thumbs up if you like the new look, and yeah, let's unveil one of the two preview looks.
This is the AFC in all its glory. And as you will notice, going through the schedule, there are more advantage spots for AFC teams and more disadvantaged spots for NFC teams. Andy, can you guess why?
Because of the stupid 17th game. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be more home games. You're going to have more home games. You can have more facing opponent off a second straight away game, third straight away game, facing them in a funny spot. Like, it's just going to happen more often when you are having this many home games compared. So, and truthfully, we said this last week or earlier this week. I kind of hope they just go to 18 games. If you're going to go to 17, just go to 18. Balance this out. Somebody's going to cry by the end of the season about this. So hopefully we just get to 18 and sort this out. But yeah, the AFC. And really, now that I'm thinking about it, the AFC is tougher. Like, it's a tougher conference. Maybe so. I guess for this 1 year and however many years we have it, I guess. But at least for this year, I'm happy that the AFC has it a little easier because it's a tougher overall conference. So maybe it will balance the power out a little. But yeah, for now, when you look at these, you will see more advantages in the AFC schedule.
In the blind, how would you line AFC wins versus NFC wins this season? -8.5.
Yeah, I was gonna say 7-8, I suppose. Like, kind of split the difference. Okay. 7.5, juicy to the over. Juicy to the AFC.
There always is. There's a complete, and let's kind of go through the notes. Let's talk about notes about the bye first. Some other advantage, disadvantage spots. What else? What we identify. Some of the miscellaneous stuff, and then we'll kind of break down and highlight some of the true winners and losers and how they may affect some conference. Or some conference and some division prices. So starting with the AFC and the bye notes. Every team has a bye. How about that?
That is true. That will always be true.
Do you have a thought?
Maybe two byes eventually.
Do you have a thought about whether an early buy or a late buy is better this year? And I just want to note that the earliest buys come to the likes of Atlanta, New York Giants, San Francisco, and the New York Jets in week 6. So no buys before week 6. Sometimes we used to see them in like 5, sometimes week 4. No buys till week 6 this year. And then we have some late buys. There are buys as late as week 14 for the likes of Indianapolis, Miami, New England, and the Philadelphia Eagles, all very, very, very late buys. So you come out of your bye and you just have the final quarter of the season left, 4 games. Do you have a general thought about whether, if you had a choice, would you take an early buy or a late buy this season?
Oh man, I mean,
Short preseason.
It would depend how it's everything context. It would depend how if my team was gearing up for the postseason or not. Like, you've seen what happened, and obviously Big Ben was a mess, and there was other issues. But like what happened with Pittsburgh last year, having that early buy, playing forever many weeks in a row. If I was a competitive team and I was looking to make a deep run, I would want a later buy. I'd want late in the season to regroup. If I was a rebuilding team, I guess I wouldn't really give a shit.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, it could affect a team like Philly, Philly, who has so many so many new parts, so many new integrations, a lot of guys coming off of injury, not getting a buy until week 14 is rough, kind of. But in general, I agree with you. I'd rather have a later buy than an early buy, but one right smack dab in the middle, week 9 would probably be the ideal week to have a buy, I would guess. It is going to be weird though, like week 14 is like kind of late in December. You're not getting a break until late in December. So they should have just given everybody 2 buys, and then that's probably where we're going once there's an 18-game schedule, but whatever. By playing teams coming off of a bye, wildly disproportionate across the various teams. This has been covered by some other folks that other folks who kind of do just the raw numbers of extra rest disadvantage over the course of a season. But you have a team like New England who gets absolutely neutered. New England got neutered. They have to play teams off of bye back-to-back weeks, week 7, week 8. And then their bye, week 14, is completely neutralized because coming into week 15, they're playing Indianapolis, who's also off a bye. So they do not get the 7-game advantage from a rest standpoint, and they have to play 2 teams back-to-back who do have that advantage. Similarly, Miami plays 2 teams back-to-back who have that rest disadvantage, or when they have that rest disadvantage. And, oh, by the way, that happens to come after they fly home from playing the Jaguars in London. Last thought on buys here for the AFC before we flip over to the NFC, specifically relating to Miami electing not to take their bye after playing London?
Probably that's probably the biggest one. That's the one that stuck out right away. It's like, oh no, who did that? Was it Indy a few years ago? I feel like someone.
Yeah, Indy did. They ended up winning against the Bears, but the Bears really peed down their leg in that game.
Yeah, it's not a great thing to do, I don't think. I'm not sure if what the other option was. If they got their bye between the 2 New York teams instead, I guess that's okay. You're getting extra rest for a home game versus the Jets doesn't seem to be as good as getting extra rest somewhere else. But yeah, instead they're playing, in London, and then 2 straight teams who are off their bye, one of them being at Buffalo, who's obviously a very good team. So if Atlanta turns out to be a good team, that's going to be a nasty stretch. If they screw it up over in London, that's going to be a terrible 3-game stretch for the organization in general.
Yeah. Atlanta, the beneficiaries of that, because Atlanta they lose that home game going to London, which we'll talk about in a second. But then coming off their bye, they get to play Miami, who's coming home from London immediately. So that'll be a little bit tricky. Honestly, this stretch of games that we're talking about for Miami, I won't include Indianapolis week 4, but let's start at Tampa week 5. Tampa at the Jags in London, home for Atlanta, at Buffalo, both off buys. That's 4 very, very, very tough games. I think you're probably happy with the 2-2, but likely looking at a 1-3 there, maybe an 0-4. No disagreement on your part?
Yeah, 1-3 is probably your median result.
How many wins are you going to? How many losses can you sustain and still win the very competitive AFC East now? 5.
Everything's so different now that I have to think in 17 game increments. But
12-5, is that going to get it done against the Bills?
12-5 is, 12-4 and 12-5 are very different records. But yeah, 12-5 feels like an attainable, especially just looking at Buffalo's schedule right now. I mean, they play at KC, at Tennessee, at Tampa, at New Orleans. Their road games aren't easy, but Buffalo, 11, 12, 13 wins is definitely on the table for them. So falling behind that badly is it's not great. It might spell the end of things.
Yeah, but that said, like if you had designs to play Miami wins the AFC East, are you going to get a better price before they play Houston week 9 or right this minute?
I mean, probably then.
Yeah.
And I mean, and just
agree.
looking at
this was a
Buffalo's
setup.
schedule,
this was
too,
just a setup for an example purposes, but this is kind of the thought process that this helps me.
It's a two-part problem too, because you got to look at how Buffalo will play through that stretch as well.
Of course,
Buffalo hosting Pittsburgh, hosting Washington, hosting Houston with a bye, probably beating Miami at home.
That one's the big one. Beating Miami at home week 8. Then
flips it. That gets you a bigger number.
Right then and right there. That gets you a bigger number. And so if you have designs of betting Miami, first of all, if you're like, man, if Tua puts it together this year, Miami can win the AFC East. I don't disagree with that if he puts it together. But guess when I'm going to bet that? I'm not going to bet it now. There's just no reason to. There's no reason to. They're going to have 4, maybe 5 losses by the time we get to week 9. And at that point, you are going to get a substantially better price. And honestly, I'm probably not going to bet it because if you look at Buffalo's schedule, it is super duper soft down the home stretch. You see these last 4 games, man. They get to host 2 NFC South opponents, 2 NFC South opponents in Carolina and Atlanta, up in frozen Orchard Park in December and January. Bring in a dome team. Awesome. Let's bring in our dome team in week 16. Sounds great. And then you get to play New England and New York Jets, who you're going to be touchdown plus favorites against in both of those spots. Maybe at New England, you're a 3.5 point favorite if New England happens to be good, which I doubt. But whatever the case is, Buffalo down that home stretch, if they sputter at all, man, I might be bombs away on some Buffalo to win the East. What do you think?
Yeah, it doesn't seem just how we feel about New England. Obviously, the Jets are complete rebuild. Like the price is the price for a reason. It doesn't seem all that like. And just now that you get into some of these, I think that's why this is such a good tool when you start to look at some of these division prices to make the playoff prices, anything like that. So yeah, I'd like Miami as a sneaky team with a coach we kind of like and some pieces coming together, and maybe with the uncertainty of Tua, it's. You don't look at Miami as possibly a win to the division price. Maybe it's if they play well enough, it's an alt win total over like 11.5 wins. Yeah. They win 12 games, don't win the division. Something along those lines. Like if it's a high variance, long swing to the good side, they play well enough and maybe don't end up winning the division anyways, but you can win some money if you bet them to make the playoffs, to go over their win total, to get over their alternate win total, something along those lines. So yeah, it kind of helps me put some of the puzzle pieces together on that.
Yeah. And plus, if you wait on a Miami price, even if you do love them, and again, this is not betting advice, this is just hypothetical. If you love Miami, but you still have to acknowledge the uncertainty of Tua, waiting until week 9 gives you the opportunity to collect some data on him to improve your prior on what Tua is capable of. Like I promise you're going to know a hell of a lot more about Tua in week 9 than you know right now. I promise. Yeah. And yeah, that should presumably add confidence and reduce variance in your projection of what they can get to from a win standpoint. And at the time you get to week 9, having already taken a tough loss to the Bills, you can then kind of make a decision about how you want to attack that future market if you even want to. So that's were kind of my key buy thoughts as I looked at the AFC. If we want to flip over to the NFC, again, a number of teams that avoid having to play anyone off of a bye. Whereas teams like the Bears, teams like the Vikings, teams like the Packers all have to play teams off a bye twice. So that's 3 of your NFC North teams.
It's unbalanced like this every year. You'll find like here's a team or 2 or 5 that play nobody off the bye.
Tampa
and then
does
there's
too.
a stretch
Seattle
like
does too.
Yeah, and then you'll find a stretch like not only does this team play somebody off the bye, you play 2 teams off the bye in a row. Like Dallas and Minnesota gets Dallas and Baltimore. Minnesota, it does kind of neuter it because Minnesota's off their bye into the first one. But if you want to say, well, that's a positive for Minnesota, well, it's also a negative. Like their bye is neutered by Dallas. So same thing, Chicago, Arizona, and Green Bay both off their bye, getting a little extra rest off of Thursday Night Football again. But still, if you want to get extra rest off Thursday Night Football, it's nice if you can take advantage of that instead of playing a team off their bye. So
and vice versa.
There's a few of these spots where it's just the same thing with Tampa Bay. They're getting off their bye, playing a team coming off their bye as well. So a bunch of these are that way. It's like they try to make it up to them a little, but again, it's not the same. It doesn't give you enough. And Green Bay's aren't back to back, but they're two spots sandwiched around the Minnesota game.
Two spots against presumptive playoff teams in a stretch where they are playing otherwise difficult road games, and their home games are neutered. That's tricky, man. Bringing in Seattle, bringing in the Rams, both off their bias is going to be interesting. But I think it was interesting to me that you had Green Bay obviously is the most. Green Bay and Seattle were the 2 most impacted by this. Seattle in week 7, 8 has back to bye off the buys, having to play New Orleans and Jacksonville. So New Orleans probably matters. Jacksonville probably doesn't, but they're both at home at least.
And anybody who is looking at these while we're looking at these charts while we're watching, you want to explain your little, the colors all have a little legend off the side. You want to explain the little symbols that we started throwing in the other year?
Oh, sure.
What is it? Clock, airplane, snowflake.
Okay, so for the disadvantage.
Oh, and there's an up arrow.
The disadvantage spots. I got a couple of different symbols here. They're all colored with a very faint yellow. These are I consider these mild disadvantage spots. I would not go above and beyond in saying this is a scheduled loss because it's so bad. For any of these, like this is just like, hey, if there's a snowflake in your cell, that means you're either a warm weather team or a dome team that is being asked to go play in the frigid cold in the typically cold time of year. And that's just, it tends to impact performance marginally. You just at least want to know about it. If you have a sunshine in your cell, that means you are a cooler weather team. Maybe you had your training camp in the cooler weather north, and you are being forced to go play in Miami and stand in the sunny side of the field in the month of September, which traditionally zaps and impacts player performance, especially in the second half. That's one of my favorite angles is team with a lead in the heat of Miami sun coming out of halftime and just losing their legs. I feel like you could point to a number of examples from that since the new Hard Rock Stadium opened up and they put the visitors in the direct fall sun. It is really nasty. Terrible to do that to human beings, but they do. So that's the sunshine and the snowflake. The pointing up is an indication of earlier in the season. Maybe you don't have your legs under you because you're still coming off of a COVID year and a limited training camp. And you have to go play at altitude. And there's only I think there were only 2 teams that happens to this year. We'll get into Denver's schedule a little bit more in a bit because it's kind of funny. Usually the Denver effect really is week 1, week 2. You see teams with jelly legs at altitude. This year it's week 3, week 4. So maybe by this time you've kind of got your legs under you. But the Jets in week 3 and the Ravens in week 4 both have to go play at altitude. The London note is obviously that's self-explanatory. I hope
that one does make sense. Like, just going. It was nice. It was something we didn't. I don't know. I was about to say it's something we didn't have to deal with last year, but at the same time, we've made money off the London games. Just
Twickenham
sitting there waiting, biding our time to figure out. Like it's like a standoff between the 2 coaches, especially when it's 2 coaches that we don't trust. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
who's going to make the worst decision about travel here? Who's
Yeah.
going to show up like Saturday afternoon or something god awful like that? Or
Yeah.
who's traveling from, like their East Coast game back to like the Midwest and then to London instead of just flying to London from like New York? Like there's always something.
Yeah, it's Miami this year because they're going at Jacksonville home and then presumably at London, which is an 8.5 hour flight. We found out today. Longer flight than flying to Seattle. The last two symbols worth noting, there is a clock that is also self-explanatory. That is a West Coast or Mountain Time team that is playing in the early spot on the East Coast. So basically the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time kickoff for a team that traditionally lives in the West. So those are the clocks. The last one, this one is mostly just for me to kind of help keep track of this sort of stuff. But I put an airplane on the first road trip after an extended homestand. Does that check out? And why would I want to know about that?
I mean, that is a thing too. When these teams get these weird stretches where they play, God, well, remember Atlanta's like, was that last year or 2 years ago where they played like
Every
8
game in
straight
a dome.
games indoors
Yeah.
or something? It was maybe
Yeah.
more than that, but because it was like, oh, their away games are Indy and New Orleans, and they're home a bunch again. It's like every one of these is a dome game for a long stretch. But yeah, being at home for 3-4 games in a row and then finally having to travel, sometimes there can be a little more of a disadvantage spot once you've gotten comfortable at home. I don't know if we can maybe, although Killer Sports is going away, I don't know if that's going to be like a paywall thing or not. I use that all the time. It might be worth looking at.
So the other thing about the reason I wanted those highlighted, not even just that a team is going to perform worse when that happens, but they could be overvalued by the market.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because they've been home and they've been comfortable, and it's a potential sell high.
I can't believe I didn't catch on because I actually brought that up with Cincy.
You did.
Like when we talked about that earlier, I just kind of spaced that. We'll get to that division here eventually because there's a weird schedule blur. I don't know if it's a complete anomaly. I'm sure this has happened before, but yeah, Cincy has some weird things to their schedule, and they're not going to be a great team anyway.
Yeah, but there are a couple of 3 week in a row homestands. Minnesota has one, Dallas has one, Cleveland has one. The one that Cincinnati has one. You mentioned that. Miami has one. The one that was very interesting though was Baltimore's. Baltimore is home from week 5 to week 9. They are home for 5 straight weeks. One of those weeks is their bye. But then that has a consequence because week 10 through week 14, they are on the road 4 of those 5 weeks.
4 out of 5.
So yeah, that's kind of the idea of doing this stuff. Our YouTube is dumping on us today. That's a bummer, man. We'll have to figure out what's going on here. But yeah, the general yellow squares are marginally impactful. The orange ones indicate you are on the 2nd week of a back-to-back road games. The brown ones indicate you are on the 3rd week of a back-to-back road game. The hot pink is your opponent is coming off of the bye, and the softer pink is your opponent is coming off of Thursday night football. I think whereas the bye question has largely been solved in the handicapping community, people know exactly what they want to do in terms of adjusting for the bye. The Thursday night football question is less solved, in my opinion, because there are less rules around what you can do the week, in the couple of days you have in that week of preparation after Thursday night football. You can still have guys come in and, kind of install some new plays. You have a little bit more time to get your guys rested and recovered and to install wrinkles and plays and really break down your opponent's strengths and weaknesses. And I believe that when you have extra rest off of Thursday night football, sometimes you play among your best games of the season.
And we see that every year too, especially I think again, not every team is built different. Not every the same advantage doesn't affect every team the same. Like some of these, a team with more veterans or a team with a better coaching staff, it's like a multiplier. Like the Thursday night rest break for a shitty young coach. I mean, let keep throwing Zach Taylor into the bus, but like someone who, he's younger as far as experience, and he's actually pretty high on first coach fired props for so many other bad coaches being out there. But somebody like that, the multiplier isn't there. Like taking advantage of that just isn't the same as. I mean, I hate to just say Andy Reid off a bye in July. We're not even. That's our first. We should have a counter for that. Andy Reid off a bye counter for the year. But a good coach with a veteran coaching staff or veteran players and a team who's experienced success, a disciplined team is going to take more advantage of that stuff. So some of the, we joke about the bye getting neutered by another team being off the bye or Thursday. It's like some of these advantages. It's why we said it's not just here's the bet on and bet against spots. Like again, the context, like, having 10 days of rest is not the same for every team. Some teams are just not well coached, well managed. They don't take advantage of these things.
Or they don't have good training staffs.
It's not going to make a difference.
Or they're the Chargers. And they're not going to get their guys healthy with the extra time. The flip side of this example of having an extra 3 days to prepare for your next opponent is the short week before Thursday Night Football. And again, another angle that I don't think is necessarily perfectly priced by the market is when you have an experienced head coach going up against a rookie head coach on Thursday Night Football. Typically, the experienced head coaches are installing plays the week before for that Thursday Night Football game, recognizing that with the short week, with the no practice on Monday, with the current rule situation in the NFL, you're going to need to be ahead of the game by a week if you're going to look your sharpest on that Thursday night game. And guess what we have this year in the NFL? You're not going to believe it. 7 rookie head coaches playing on Thursday Night Football, which is outstanding news for a lot of us. No team gets to play 2 of these. And in general, you don't have a ton of good coaches going up against teams with inexperienced coaches. So Kansas City is an example where you do have that. Kansas City and Andy Reid get to play against the LA Chargers and Brandon Staley on Thursday Night Football. That should be a mismatch. Frank Reich in Indianapolis get to play against the New York Jets and Robert Saleh on Thursday Night Football. That should be a mismatch. Bill Belichick and the Patriots get to go against Art Smith on Thursday Night Football. Little rematch of the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That's probably advantage Bill. I don't think that's super, I don't think that's a super controversial call. And then the other
Nagy,
ones,
man.
Yeah, even Nagy. Nagy gets to go up against the Dan Campbells of the world, and Bruce Arians gets to go up against the Nick Siriannis of the world. So, who do we see? Who gets to draw Dave Culley? Looks like it's
Carolina.
Panthers draw Dave Culley on Thursday.
Early in the season too. I think this is not as important early, and maybe argue with me on this, I guess, but you think early in the season, late in the season, this changes? Early in the season, you're still getting to know your team a little as a rookie head coach, probably less prepared to prepare them, but also you're not as ground down as a team. I still think it's probably worse early on because you've had less time to work with the offense, less time to put a game plan, and you've only put 2 game plans in place at that point if you're not counting preseason shit, which you shouldn't. So, yeah, rough spot for Culley there. Week 3, having to play a Thursday night game right away off a game against, Jameis Winston there.
Even a coach that I have tremendous respect for in Cleveland, he had a short week into week 2 last year going up against Zach Taylor, and the Browns could not manifest a cover. So it's still possible that earlier in the season it matters more. But the rookie head coaches did not do especially well against the spread last year. Carolina did not cover. Cleveland did not cover. The Giants did. That was the Carson Wentz game where everything was set up to go right for Philly to get back on track and save their season, and they did not. That was, I think, the last time I bet on Carson Wentz, still to this day. So, yeah, there was only 3 of these examples last year, and there's now 7 this year, so that's exciting. Thursday Night Football is going to be fun to bet this year. Didn't really have a ton of other advantage, disadvantage stuff to bring up here. I guess the one last thing that's kind of weird, the requested road trip.
We had trouble finding this year.
It's been buried. This information was a little buried. Apparently, San Francisco is, as best we can tell you, San Francisco is the only team that requested 2 East Coast trips to occur in back-to-back weekends so they can stay at the Greenbrier and get a focused week of practice. The last time San Francisco did this, they came out blazing and buried the Giants, even though they had massive injuries. The time before that San Francisco did this, they came out and they buried the Bengals, who I bet on that day and regretted as probably the worst play I made for the entirety of the 2019 season.
+1, man. You're both on that.
It was +1. I think they lost. I mean, just off the top of my head, I think it was 42-3.
Yeah, they lost.
It felt like 42-3.
At least it wasn't like a close game. We didn't have to sweat that one. There are a couple of these I wondered about. It's divisional stuff, so maybe not. And it's Dallas. It's not like Dallas isn't West Coast, but Dallas does have Washington and the Giants back to back. I'm not sure I think you probably fly back to Arlington for that.
I think you do too.
Yeah. Otherwise, really, honestly, some of these are.
There was one that was kind of a head scratcher that I was really trying to track down, and I never got a straight answer. And we'll talk about it again in a second here. But it's the Denver Broncos. They played back-to-back roadies early in the season. We'll get to their schedule. We'll break down the AFC West in a little bit more detail in a second here. But that is one where I'm going to be looking for more information to see if Denver decides to stay east. But best I can tell you, there was only the one team, San Francisco, that requested back-to-back roadies this year, which I think is an advantage for them, honestly. At least they have proven that they can make the most out of that. So let's see if they do it again. They would be taking advantage of Philadelphia in that second game, potentially, after presumably getting a win against Detroit week 1, which may set them up for some early season success, which we will also talk about next. But I want to go back to the AFC. And I want to talk a little AFC North.
AFC North.
What's your current temperature on Browns Ravens for AFC North?
I haven't looked at prices. Like what do we have for what's kind of market?
Let's say they're both plus 120. Let's say they're both plus 120.
And so every year we have this where there's a team that everybody's on and everybody loves them and it just doesn't work out. Like it's like, oh, this is such a popular team and everybody thought that, Super Bowl tickets, and we're laughing when they're like 4-6 somewhere down, in the middle of the season. Cleveland feels like that team, but I just can't buy it. Like I don't feel like they can F up that bad. Like Baker Mayfield would have to take a huge step back and all these additions would have to, like maybe a bunch of injuries and a regression from him. Like I'm pretty pro Cleveland this year, even with they both have tough schedules. I think they both have tough schedules. Cleveland has a really easy stretch in the middle. If Aaron Rodgers isn't playing, and I mean the end of the season could be after this. If you look at this stretch, the Detroit, at Baltimore's not easy, but then by Baltimore, Vegas, like that's a goofy spot. But if you end up with like what is it, Jordan Love, Mason Rudolph. And then whatever's left of Joe Burrow at the end of the year.
Is Mason Rudolph still on the Steelers? I thought it was Dwayne Haskins.
Hodges, Dwayne Haskins, who knows?
Yeah, that could be pretty nice. Let's talk about Baltimore first. The Ravens start out difficult, 3 out of 4 on the road. Nothing absurd travel-wise, but you do have to make 2 trips west. You got to go to Vegas for Monday Night Football. Let's just assume that they get a fair whistle in that game. Let's just assume. And then you have to go at Detroit, at Denver, weeks 3, week 4, and Kansas City sandwiched in the middle at home, a game you obviously care a lot about if you think you're going to be competing for the number 1 seed in the AFC. That's a tough opening. Sweet there. But then we get to the point we brought up previously where Baltimore has 5 weeks in a row. They do not have to get on an airplane or a bus.
It is
just show up at the stadium or stay at home.
And not only that, but and we're going to deal with this all summer. There's a lot of ifs and buts. Like, we don't know. Indy, Carson Wentz is the guy who, took the team to the Super Bowl before he got hurt. I mean, he was a big part of that season. Carson Wentz is that guy, or Carson Wentz is the guy he is now. Indy can go a couple different ways. So, like, that Indy game could be a cakewalk if shit doesn't work out there. The Chargers.
That's their 3rd week in a row on the road. Also,
yeah,
Indies.
Yeah, Indy. So Indy with a quarterback, we don't know if it's going to work. That could be, if Minnesota is scuffling like they did last year, kind of a middling team. Cincinnati didn't fix their offensive line. You have a bye. Like, the Chargers, the toughest game in there might be against a rookie head coach. Like, truthfully. Yeah. So
I would say
a nice stretch for them.
I would say with pretty high confidence that Baltimore, I don't believe that they emerge clean out of those first 4 weeks. But I don't think I see a loss in their next 5. And so there's a potential buy low on Baltimore starting week 5. Then things get gnarly for them, though. Week 10 through week 14. They have their 4 out of 5 on the road. Miami is one where you potentially can sell high on them for that game, depending on how hot the market is on Baltimore at that time. Chicago is a weird one because that's their 2nd straight roadie, but they get extra rest off of Thursday Night Football. But Chicago's coming off of their bye, so I'm probably going to skip that one. There's a little too much going on there. This is where things get effed for them, and
again, that Chicago game. Back to that real quick. Sometimes there's just too much going on.
Yeah,
and we're not going to sit here on July 7th and say I'm not betting that game because there's too much situational stuff going on. Like, I'm going to evaluate that market the same as any other game when we get to it, but I'm going to remember this, and I'm going to look at my chart and be like, God, there is still a lot going on in this game, man.
Yes, and then 12, 13, 14. This is where I think the clear advantage tilts in favor of Cleveland for the division. Baltimore hosts Cleveland, their 1 home game, and this 5-game stretch. Then they have to go at Pittsburgh, at Cleveland. Okay. You know what Cleveland gets to do in that stretch? They got to go at Baltimore. They got to go at Baltimore. They get their bye, and then they got Baltimore at home. So they can absolutely put everything on the table in that first game. Get that win. Put the clamps on it. Get that win in the first game on the road at Baltimore. Most important game on your whole calendar. You get that win, then you get a week off and you get to host Baltimore after Baltimore has to play a physical game against Pittsburgh. Fucking you. This sucks for Baltimore. Sucks. I cannot believe that the NFL did this to them. I always look at what game Baltimore is playing after Pittsburgh and what game Pittsburgh's playing after Baltimore, because it's always interesting to me because they always seem to be especially hurt in those games. And I can't believe that it's for the division against Cleveland on the road, who's coming off a bye. Like, this is mind-blowing to me that they gave Baltimore this scheduled loss. I can't believe it.
We're going to be down on Pittsburgh this year. Like, Big Ben is broken. The offensive line, probably even worse somehow. The defense is less elite. I mean, it'll still be a good defense, but I mean, guys coming off major injuries, like some real major injuries, not the ones you just bounce back off, but like Pittsburgh is not going to be a pushover. Like, again, it could be a case where Pittsburgh wins very few games, but it's not going to be like easy wins. This is not going to be some team that wins the division and goes out and wins 3 games. Or, even if they are like a 5-6 win team and it's really disappointing, they will be in a lot of games. Like, Pittsburgh's not going to fall off the face of the earth. They still have a pretty decent coach and a bunch of skill players. And if the offense can make anything happen, it's still very dangerous with those receivers. So, like, we're going to discount Pittsburgh a lot, but we have to kind of remember, like, it's still not just it's not Cincinnati.
Well, let's talk about Pittsburgh a little bit. Mm-hmm. Their bye gets neutralized.
They won the division, man. Their schedule's not easy.
Their schedule is not. It is not easy, man. It is not. They start out at Buffalo. They're going to be touchdown dogs. They got to go. Then they get Raiders, Cincy, blah, 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 blah. At Green Bay, probably 2-2 start, I think is a fair expectation there. Maybe 3-1 if something breaks your way. Denver, Seattle bye. Seattle coming off of Thursday Night Football, a little extra time to prep. That might be tough. But that's a lot of home games. That's not a lot of travel. I count week 2 home, week 3 home, week 4 on the road, 5 home, 6 home, 7 bye. So you are lightly traveled at that point, and you are probably looking at a winning record, and people are probably feeling like, hey, everyone said we were going to suck, but here we are at 5-3 or whatever, right? Cleveland gets their bye neutralized, or Pittsburgh gets their bye neutralized a bit because Cleveland has extra rest coming off Thursday Night Football. And then probably wins against Chicago and Detroit, or at least a competitive game against Chicago and a win against Detroit, who's coming off their bye. So through this point in the season, I think everybody's feeling pretty positive in Pittsburgh. Okay.
Then they go. What happens then?
They go to schedule hell. They go to schedule hell. I cannot tell you how difficult week 11 through week 18 is going to be for Pittsburgh. If they are not comfortably in the playoff picture when they beat Detroit in week 10, Pittsburgh ought to sincerely consider tanking for a draft pick.
Yeah.
Because they are, I mean, how many wins are in this stretch from week 11 to week 18? At the Chargers, at Cincy, back-to-back, home for Baltimore, at Minnesota, and then you get Tennessee, KC, Cleveland, Baltimore down the home stretch. That is 4 expected either co-favorites to win their division or clear favorites to win their division all in a row in the last 4 games of your regular season.
No, but your home games are playoff teams.
Playoff teams, yes.
Like playoff teams from that. Not only just like, and I hate using that, when we use metrics on strength of schedule, we try not to just go off last year, but like Baltimore, Tennessee, and Cleveland are not like, oh, they were playoff teams with big win totals from last year. No, they're expected to do well again. It's not Pittsburgh is a good example of one that's supposed to fall off. They're not Pittsburgh. But when your home games are that tough, and then you have 5 road games, and again, a few of them are against playoff teams. Minnesota kind of the cusp of the playoffs. The Chargers have the talent last year to be a playoff team. Cincinnati, your road game at Cincinnati, while you're waiting to prep for Baltimore, if sandwich spots really exist, that's kind of a bad spot.
That's one, yeah. And because you oh, by the way, you just traveled to the LA and now go travel to Cincinnati, and you have Baltimore on deck. Okay, now go to Minnesota. Okay, over that stretch of 8 games, would you be more surprised with 5-3 or 0-8?
5-3.
I think I would too. I think my expected wins over this 8 games is like 2 and change.
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore would have to have a bunch of injuries.
Yeah, I mean,
to get to 5-3,
throw out the injuries, but just mean expected wins over this 8-game stretch.
If you extrapolate every the multiverse of schedules, like in that 5-3 scenario, they beat Cincinnati. Lamar Jackson is in the hospital for this whole stretch. They get the Tennessee win on the back of just something, and then maybe Minnesota. Is that even 5? I think I only counted 4.
You only counted 4. They got to beat the Chargers too. Yeah. It's wild, man. It's wild. So realistically, I'm not going to beat the drum that Pittsburgh is going to regress, that they're overrated, that forget Pittsburgh, they don't have a chance, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's overstating it. But I will absolutely tell you that be prepared for what will befall them at the end of their season if things, if this is a relatively healthy campaign for the expected playoff contenders, because that is hell. Never seen anything like it. Cincinnati, you mentioned, interesting little stretch there where they get at the Raiders off their bye, 3 games in a row at home where the opposing team is on back-to-back weeks. And then they have to fly to Denver and play in the cold and the snow in December, which will be interesting.
And this was one of those too where I said, like, this might be the case where the Raiders are really bad. You're getting Cincy off a bye. The Raiders have been a bad team, but Cincy's nothing to write home about. And Cincy might be a little overrated on the road traveling out to the West Coast. You bet Cincy.
Hey, they're putting it together. They're putting it together, man.
They're
Look at this, a late season push. Zach Taylor saving his job. Joe Burrow looks like the man.
So this is like the one spot where you can just be like, you know what, I'm taking Derek Carr at home here. And against the spread, especially if it's a close game, if it's a pick, like the offense might really slog along. If this offense slogs along, I'll avoid that game. Like I'll just won't bet that. But then the Pittsburgh Chargers, San Francisco, they can go 0-3 there, but cover the spread each time. Yeah, like that would not be out of the realm of possibilities. Those teams are off back-to-back road games. You bet them 3 times, and then they get so overrated at that point. Yeah, you come back on Drew Lock.
Yeah,
you know,
Drew Lock at home at altitude.
You're betting on Drew Lock at home because if they, let's say just 2 out of 3 against the spread, maybe even a sneaky win there in that 3-game stretch, they're overrated. Flying to Denver, playing with young quarterback at altitude in the cold weather late in the season. Ugh.
Yeah, against the pass rush.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I have my comments on the AFC North. I really do feel like the schedule tilted the balance in favor of Cleveland. I really do. And we got to talk to our buddy Suma at some point because I know he's a Ravens guy, at least at this point in the season. He's fired up about the Ravens.
Yeah, I think they're both going to win a shitload of games. Like it might be a tiebreaker at like 13 wins to see who gets this division.
I mean,
I have a hard time being down on the Ravens, especially
if Cleveland is 2-0 head-to-head against Baltimore. Riddle me how Cleveland doesn't win the AFC North. Yeah, I don't know. It's set up well for them.
Yeah,
it really is. It really is. Let's flip to the NFC least. How about your Cowboys?
Yeah.
Weird schedule.
That's a tough start.
Really,
that's a tough way to start. Getting your quarterback off a horrific injury, playing the Super Bowl champs in the bright lights, and then
banner night.
One of the teams with the most talent that underperformed last year with the rookie head coach, but that's not a great way to start the season.
No,
I'm not excited about that if I'm a Cowboys fan. And then, that other stretch you have highlighted there. And, if anybody is listening to this in podcast form, I'd encourage you to go look at the YouTube channel on some of this stuff or even just look at the charts later on or while you're listening to this. But we have a section highlighted for the Cowboys between weeks 11 and week 15 where there's 4 road games.
4 out of 5 on the road.
4 out of 5 on the road. And 3 in a row. So you go back to back to back, 2 of them in division. If you do poorly and that's 3 back-to-back, 2 of them are division games, you're putting yourself on the outside looking in, and that's tough because the NFC isn't tough this year. There's a lot of playoff spots up for grabs, and this kind of thing late in the season really puts you in a tough spot when you're trying to get back into the playoffs and probably save your job if you're McCarthy.
Yeah, that Raiders game on Thanksgiving is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, that's a weird one. My God.
You better play well on that one home game you have in this 5-game stretch against the Raiders on Thanksgiving.
If they lose that game on national TV in front of everyone on the holiday, and then the rest of that road trip goes about how you'd expect it to go. It's gonna be tough for McCarthy to be there after the Philly game at the end.
It is. I completely agree. And this has cooled me a little bit on any kind of Dallas enthusiasm, to be honest.
This time last year, we were having an argument over whether we were betting McCarthy Coach of the Year or Dallas most points scored. And
you were on the Coach of the Year side of things. And I was.
Yeah, after 2 weeks, I was like, well.
I strenuously object.
Yep, I'm done. I'm done with that take. And then all the injuries, they were never getting there as an offense after that. And the defense was, man, even if they didn't get injured, what is that team? If that offense is really good, they're just the Raiders from last year. It's the offense can score. Oh my God, the other team just scored already. Go back out there. What happened?
Well, at least they invested in stopping the run, so they're going to give themselves a chance this year. They'll give themselves a chance, man. The Dallas Cowboys are not the only team in the NFC least that has 4 out of 5 late in the season. The Giants also have 4 out of 5 late in the season. At Miami, at LA. That's not an easy trip from New York. Fly down to Miami, fly out to LA. then home for Dallas, and then at Philly, at Chicago. Things could go sideways there for the Giants late. And I mean, Philly's schedule is pretty easy. I tried to highlight what I thought was the toughest part. Obviously, I don't see them starting the season especially well, particularly that week 2 game hosting San Francisco. They're going to be in a little tight spot. But they have a 3-4 road trip at Vegas, at Detroit, at Denver in there. Their middle sandwich game is hosting the Chargers, who could be frisky. I mean, Philly's probably going to lose a lot of games, but their schedule is not quite as tough as the Giants or the Cowboys.
No, and if you're Philly, you hope that Matt Ryan is done. You hope that Sam Darnold doesn't work out. You hope that Dallas can't bring it back. Like, that's how you get to 3-3 in those first 6.
Yeah, because you're not beating KC and you're not beating Tampa. You're not beating San Francisco. You're not winning your 3 home games.
No. Like, it's funny. Yeah, the winnable games are on the road, which is worse. So, I mean, anywhere like 3-3 is best case, and worst case is all of them lost. And then, I mean, these are bad teams, but then you head into 2 straight road games, 3 out of 4, 1 at altitude. Vegas and Detroit aren't good teams, but they're still NFL teams. Like the golf, anybody who bets college football realizes like the golf between, I don't know, Bama and like a bad MAC team or a bad American team. Like there's a big, big golf. But like, the difference between the best team and the worst team is only 20 points, really. And, 17 to 20 points in an NFL season, really. Yeah. Whereas those are like 60. It's still the variance bug can get you a lot quicker when the difference is only a couple touchdowns.
I probably should have highlighted down through the Jets game, because that's 5 road games in 7 weeks, all right before your bye. So you have a late bye, your team could be gassed, and you have to go travel 5 weeks out of 7. That's tough. That's a tough stretch, man. Philly to New York, back-to-back weeks is obviously not like especially strenuous, but it's still, you're still not in the friendly confines. Your finale for 4 divisional games, 3 of them home, is kind of nice. So if you're doing surprisingly well, let's say you're 3-6 through your first 9 games. Can you win your last? What, can you win 5 of your last
8?
8?
I'm not even. Does that number add up to right? I'm still not used to that.
That would get you to 8 and 9. Where I'm going with this is, can 8 wins win the NFC East?
No, I think it can. Not this year.
I think it can, man. These schedules are all hard. Look at
8
Washington.
9? 8
Let's
9
jump over to Washington.
Yeah, they're all tough schedules, but
let's jump over to Washington. I mean,
instant reaction. Who has the best chance to win the division without even looking at the odds in your mind?
Washington's got the best team, but they've got the worst schedule.
That's right. I think it might be like if Daniel Jones is a little better. Like
their Giants
they all have tough schedules. Good. Yeah,
the Giants' defense could gut them to a division title. Sure,
you have a shutdown corner, and you have a halfway decent rest of the defense. If Daniel Jones continues to improve as a runner and Sack doesn't get used like we used running backs in the early 90s, that's a division-winning team, and it's like a 9 or 10 win team. Like Washington's better, but tougher schedule. Dallas is, who knows? Like if they can put it together, the defense is not going to be better. They drafted a lot, but that doesn't fix it.
My gut says the Giants have a good enough defense to get them some hard-fought wins against some average and below-average teams. And my gut says Jalen Hurts is good enough to get some hard-fought wins against some below-average and some average teams. But the best team for sure is Washington, but Washington's schedule is just nasty. Their last 5 games. So first of all, let's talk about market entry again real quick. Washington football team, last 5 games are all against NFC East. Very weird. Haven't seen that before. Don't know why they did that to them. Don't know why the entire division really is backloaded here. Like, And you know why this sucks? It sucks for us as NFL fans because all of the drama late in the season, all of the games that they're going to really put in prime time, put in front of us, push out there because they're going to be meaningful, they're going to be against these dog shit teams. And it's a bummer. But like look the Dallas Cowboys play 1, 2, 4 of their last 5 are against NFC East. The Giants, 3 of their last 4 are against the NFC East. Philly, their entire last 4 NFC East, and Washington, their entire last 5 NFC East. So there's really no reason to go bananas on this market at all until Thanksgiving. None. These teams are just going to get punked by all the good teams on their schedules. They may win a couple coin flips here and there, and then it'll all get decided in December and January.
Yeah, I think it's nice when you can have that. It's almost a luxury because you can evaluate if you think the market isn't pricing it correctly at that point. You'll have a lot more information by then. So that's kind of where I'm at. I wouldn't place a future bet to win the division, any of these teams, with your money. And like you said,
we agree.
Like you said, this is, and again, we do this every year. We say, hey, here's a plan. It's not like saying I am going to make a bet in late October on one of these teams. No, I'm giving myself the option to make a bet. Like saying
this is an option
call. October is probably better than now. And
this is an option call.
Yeah, Brilliant. It's an option call. I might not make that bet. So yeah, we'll get to this division. This will be a very interesting one as we get through the season to kind of evaluate.
Just to point out that Washington stretch at Buffalo, at Atlanta, home for New Orleans, home for KC, at Green Bay, at Denver, like
not great.
Not great. That's not great.
I think Alex Smith retired. Saw the schedule.
I don't think you wanted to play that stretch, man. It's not a good schedule. And also, by the way, I haven't fully vetted all of the. There's a little M there on the Raiders game. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
That stands for the Washington football team is coming off of a Monday night game, whereas the Raiders are coming off of a Thursday. So there is an extra day.
It's the double-double. That doesn't happen that often.
It doesn't happen that often. It's really rare. And I got to double check that there aren't more of those on the schedule. But so far, that's the only one I found.
Now that's interesting.
Raiders get an 11-day prep, and Washington gets 6.
Oh, man. Yeah,
cool.
Not great for the football team. It's almost as if Daniel Snyder's being punished.
Karma's getting him regardless.
Yeah.
Let's flip next to the AFC West. Denver Broncos, as we mentioned, have 2 road games on the East Coast to start their schedule. The second of those in sweaty hot Jacksonville, Florida. This sucks for them for 2 reasons. Number 1, they don't get the altitude advantage in weeks 1 and week 2.
And that's a thing we've highlighted in years past, where it's like
it is
going and playing up in Denver right off the bat. That sucks. Tough. Teams never do good then.
Never do good.
That's gone.
This is again also looks like if they decide to stay east for that Jacksonville game, which I think they should, I would keep my team east, get an extended week of preseason in there, get that Jacksonville win. Then you get home for Jets, home for Baltimore. You can get off to a decent start as long as you can win that week 1 against the Giants. After that, their schedule is pretty cake. They get to host. They don't get to use their cold weather advantage except for the Detroit game. Maybe week 12 against the Chargers. That might be a cold weather game, but I'm not totally expecting that. But week 14, you're getting a dome team in the snowy confines of Mile High, which is cool. But overall, I thought Denver's schedule was relatively easy / fair. KC's schedule is front loaded like a MFer. I don't think there's really a rush to bet a KC future considering they start Cleveland, Baltimore Chargers. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not jumping at it. We had some last year and we got a good price on it, but at the same time, the schedule's getting tougher, and I don't know if like people catching up to them is a thing. but it certainly is in the NFL. Like, you got to keep innovating, otherwise you're not going to stay on top. And also, like, those are teams that could all be in the in the hunt in the AFC right off
they
the
got
bat.
Buffalo
3 in
week
a row.
5 too. I should have dragged that down through 5. Buffalo week
Yeah.
5 is no cupcake. So this is why I think this. So if everything goes right for KC, they're 5-0, right? Have they really exceeded expectations at that point? Is their number come in that much? Probably not.
No.
But but the math might tell you that it should have, right? And so after they play Buffalo, if they beat Buffalo, if they're 5-0, then might as well bombs away KC some KC numbers, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's down to like even money or something ridiculous, obviously.
No
But
way,
it's
no chance.
Especially go look at Tampa's schedule. Go look at some of these other teams' schedules. If Cleveland's 4-1 or something, if Baltimore has won all their other games beside that, maybe they're 4-1 and they lost to Buffalo. Buffalo's doing well. Like, some of these other teams are going to keep the price depressed, especially within their own conference. But yeah, like, evaluate that. That's one evaluate it going into the Washington game and kind of see, like, do I want to add some KC to my portfolio?
That would be the time I would add if I was going to add, or if they, Buffalo gets them in that spot, Buffalo might be the driver's seat for the 1. Same with Cleveland. Cleveland might get them. They might be in the driver's seat. Baltimore might get them. They might be in the driver's seat. Like, I definitely could. The Chargers might get them and be in the driver's seat for the West. Who the hell knows? Probably not, but maybe. The other thing I wanted to point out about KC's schedule, because it gets real easy. Like, after Buffalo, they got a little bit of an advantage against Green Bay, but not much. They're not really playing anyone tough.
Toughest game in there is Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee is giving them a tough time.
Well, it's the second week of a back-to-back.
Yeah.
So, like, Tennessee has played them tough. The Raiders, truthfully, kind of have played them tough. The Chargers have a good game plan against them. So maybe Chargers later in the season.
That one's Thursday Night Football.
It's a Thursday Night Football rookie head coach. So we say, the Chargers have played them tough, but that was a different Chargers organization. So I don't know, maybe I'll toss that out the window.
Through that door. Anthony Lynn's not walking through that door.
No.
See the Rams D coordinator?
Team doctor too.
Who's the Rams? Rams got a good D coordinator. It's it was the Atlanta coach, Raheem Morris, I think.
Where kept calling him Raheem Mostert. No, you're right. He is the Rams defense. He replaced Staley.
Is Lynn in O coordinator in Detroit now? I think. I think. We'll look into this.
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing about KC's schedule I wanted to point out: finishing your season road puts a premium on winning your division and getting the bye, right? But especially winning the division, right?
Yeah, at least getting a home game. But boy, getting the 1 seed again, now that the 1 seed is the only team of the bye, like, getting the 1 seed really, really matters. Like, if it's a dogfight, well, not only that, but they'll have an advantage. Having Cincinnati and Denver late in the season like that, those are some easier road games, albeit still road games, but having some lesser opponents will help you get there. But man, you don't want to go road and then have to host again. It'd be nice to go road, bye, host after a team that just played another week. It's kind of dumb to say, the bye is good, but I think it's even better when you end the season like this road. And these are tough spots. I don't expect Kansas City to be a wild card team, but stranger things have happened. But teams that have this, where they go road and then end up in a wild card spot, that is like a death
RIP
sentence.
in peace.
RIP in peace. Going road and then road playoff game.
Tampa won the Super Bowl as a wild card last year. Guess who's not winning the Super Bowl as a wild card this year? Kansas City. And it has everything to do with this end of the season. Not going through the AFC, not going road. That is a very tough ask. Tampa Bay had a home game to end their season, and they had a home game to end their playoff run. So it was a very different situation. Chargers, on the flip side, they end the season pretty damn soft. What do you make of that? Everybody's coming to them on back-to-back road games. They get a little extra rest before they got to play Houston. Although Houston, they got to play them early. They have a bunch of earlies. You can't see the clocks in all those, but the Chargers have 5 games that kick off at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, compared to 2 for Denver and 3 for the Raiders. Oh no, the Raiders have 5 also. I don't know why my clocks aren't showing up on this.
They're on the main one though, I think. But yeah,
they definitely are. Yeah.
Not the easiest first half of the season, but it gets easier. Like I have the Chargers penciled in as a playoff team, a wild card. And a big part of it is that easier second half of the season. AFC is going to be tough, but yeah, Giants at Houston, Denver at Raiders, like playing an absolute dead Raiders team at the end of the year, getting your offense right. It sucks because what we just talked about, it's probably going to end up being a wild card team that plays a road game. So you go from going from playing at Vegas, and then the next week you're probably heading to like what, Cleveland, Buffalo, Baltimore. Like none of those are easy destinations as a second straight road game. They might not go far in the playoffs, but I definitely think with that second half of the season, especially if Minnesota and Pittsburgh don't, stayed. I don't even want to say Minnesota was good. They certainly weren't a playoff team. They weren't on the level of Pittsburgh, especially for the big first part of the season when Pittsburgh wasn't losing. But Minnesota was like a fringe playoff team last year. Like their offense, obviously, with Justin Jefferson being so good, Dalvin Cook being such a good runner, like they are right there on the edge of a playoff team. I think probably still because there's not a big difference in what that team brings to the table from last year to this, and the NFC is probably easier than last year. So Minnesota and Pittsburgh aren't gimmies, but they're home games. Philly, Denver, Cincy is road games. Like that whole second half of the season, you got the KC game, but maybe that's it. So the Chargers could make a run there, end up in the playoffs, but again, going road to a road playoff game isn't great.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the Chargers schedule, somebody did bring up, Tripp brought it up, first 6 games are tricky. That is true. There's some tricky ones in there without question. But you're not doing a ton of traveling early in the season, which is kind of nice. You got to go at Washington and at Baltimore. So 2 East Coast trips in 6 weeks, but your only other road game is at KC. And
it's another one entry. Like if I was entering on the Chargers, it might be during the bye.
Yeah.
If I can find a good price for them to make the playoffs, like if somebody's hanging to make the playoff prices live during the year.
If they're 3-3 and their 3 losses are KC, Cleveland, Baltimore, those are probably the 3 best teams in the AFC.
Yeah. Give it to
them. Yeah, why not? Okay. The Raiders also pointing out at the end of their schedule is a disaster at KC in the early slot, at Cleveland in the outdoors, and at Indy in the early slot. Denver sandwiched in the middle there. That's just, I don't think the Raiders are getting any wins in their last 5 weeks of the season, I would guess. But
no, the Washington spot might, if that really does work out well for them, I hate to say like bet KC, but let's say the Raiders look really, really good because they got extra rest versus, nothing against that coaching staff. They're veteran coaches, but that's a big ask for anybody to prep for on a short week like that versus a team with extra rest who gets extra time to prep for you. Like if the Raiders look really good at home versus Washington, maybe that KC number comes within a range where we can bet it and not feel even bad about it and watch KC just mop the floor with a team that turns out wasn't that good. They just had a good spot. I think a lot of these spots here are just, hey, you're not betting on this week. You should be betting the next week after they've become over or underrated.
Yeah, without question. That's why it's so useful to look at the fabric. Let's talk about a point that Patrick brought up that I've had in the back of my head that I haven't brought up to you, but it's been I've been stewing on this because we haven't seen any home games for the Raiders with a crowd. Will home games for the Raiders have a home field advantage for the Raiders? Or will this be a destination type of deal for fans of every other team who is playing in Vegas? He brings up the Bears. Literally every Bears fan I know is planning on going to Vegas for that game.
And it's like an Arizona game. Remember the Cardinals game against the Steelers? It's like there's more terrible towels out here than anything. And,
Yeah.
Arizona's a retirement state where you get a lot of fans who just moved, especially from cold weather cities. Like, I'm not shoveling snow once I'm 60. I'm moving to Phoenix.
Patrick
You'll
on
see
one
that.
right now, man.
Yeah.
They'll have home field advantage for the Chargers and the Bengals. Of course, that's a great point. So two
Yeah, that's
games,
about
there'll
it.
be more Raiders fans than there will be opposing fans. But they may be outnumbered in a bunch of these games if it becomes a destination thing to go to Vegas to see your team play, right?
They might have to start doing like they do in European soccer, where they can only sell so many tickets to the opposing team, which is
Ooh.
super, super hard to monitor. But because I don't think it's a thing at like Knights games, even though that is such a destination for people who have a hockey team they like to follow.
Smaller arena
Like, you
by a long shot.
still like there's a really good support for the Knights. So they are excited about the Raiders out there, but it won't be as, it'll be you'll see more of a traveling crowd heading to these games than like, nobody's like, oh man, I might go watch the team play in Buffalo this weekend. I've been dying to get up to upstate New York or the Meadowlands. I want to check out some of the scenes where they shot some of the things from The Sopranos.
Yeah. Not a destination.
Vegas, Phoenix, Miami, baby.
Yeah, maybe
San Diego.
San Diego used to be, but LA is a little bit now.
Not even a team anymore.
LA might be a not a destination deal, but I am prepared for it to be a opposing team fans who live in LA decide to go to that game, like the Chargers when they were in the soccer stadium. Yeah. People who live there, live in, LA is freaking big, 20 million people. You're bound to have 50,000 Steelers fans or whatever. So Giants fans, Steelers fans, Vikings fans, Patriots fans, guarantee you all of those will be pretty hefty crowds against the Chargers.
Well, even like the Gophers had a home and away with UNLV a few years back, probably 10 years back now. But I knew a lot of people that were like, "Wow, I'm going to a Gophers game."
Let's go. All right, let's look at one more and then we'll call it a pod. This is the Arizona Cardinals, LA Rams, Seattle Seahawks, San Francisco 49ers of the NFC West. Seattle and Arizona start out the season not friendly, whereas San Francisco, boy, oh boy, does that look like a potential soft start. Obviously Green Bay and Seattle are good teams, but you get them both at home early in the season. You get your 2 weeks to kind of get right on the East Coast with your little mini camp. San Francisco can potentially get off to a good start because it gets easy for them after that. Arizona, Indy, Chicago, Arizona, not bad. You get an early bye, which could be good for them, depending on whether it's good or bad. I have no idea. But only 3 trips that they have to make east: Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Chicago. Amazingly, Seattle only has 2 early trips, by far the fewest early kickoffs of the West Coast teams, with 2. If you'll remember from the last slide, both the Chargers and the Raiders had like 5. And the Cardinals have 5 early kickoffs. Cardinals start with 3 out of 4 on the road. That sucks. I think the idea of a Cliff Kingsbury having a rousing start to this 2021 campaign, I put into serious question when I look at this, the first 6 opponents for them. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm thinking too, like, we're going to have to save these and use these schedule things like that the divisional ones.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you have to use them during the divisional previews. We might be bringing these back. We'll be bringing these back in the coming weeks for sure.
You like the look, right? Like, it's a good visual.
Well, and it's funny too, because somebody in the chat right away asked hey, do you have these by division, or are they always alphabetical to look at? I'm like, oh buddy, you're in for a surprise.
Buddy.
We're not going to get all the divisions up. We just picked the four that had the most
kind of interesting stuff to talk about.
The most interesting. We'll have all of them when we get around to those divisional or the previews for each game. But yeah,
sure.
This is the one I've had the most trouble with. Although, off the bat, and again, it may be because it was alphabetical and I looked at Arizona first, but I said, man, Tennessee's not full on East Coast. It's far enough. East Coast, West Coast hosts the Vikings. East Coast, very East Coast, all the way to Jacksonville. West Coast, back at home to play the Rams. And then San Francisco and Cleveland. And then your Cliff Kingsbury, first coach fired. Like those are Jacksonville. Jacksonville's not a good team. They're young. You're playing Tim Tebow, and a coach that might not know what's going on in the NFL. But for the most part, those are pretty quality opponents there, and 4 of them are on the road.
1-5.
Yeah, that's it's not like, oh, I guess it depends what management decides to do. They're like, hey, do we let them get right versus Houston?
Yeah.
Because after that, it's Green Bay and San Fran again. And again, there's a whole road game against Seattle before the bye. After the bye is easier. It is a little easier. You still get LA and Seattle, but you get them at home. But man, Arizona's schedule is not setting up for Cliff Kingsbury to impress and shut down the haters.
Yeah, Patrick brings up another great point. He's on fire today. Week 1, East Coast travel is mitigated. I 100% agree with that. But an early kickoff still sucks. You don't want to be doing all of your training camp in the Pacific Northwest, nice and then have to kick off at what feels like 10 o'clock your time. It's not cool. No, not good. Definitely could set yourself back in the first half of that game. Anyway, the Rams. Easiest schedule of this group by a mile, I have to say.
I know I wasn't hot on the Rams. I'm not sold on the Stafford thing. I'm not sold on the coach altogether sometimes, but I do have to say the schedule is conducive for them to play well, make a run at the division, maybe win this division. Certainly, I think the Rams are certainly a playoff team. Just again, it's the NFC. And this kind of schedule probably gets you double-digit wins pretty quickly.
The 2 toughest games in your schedule at Green Bay, you get them off of a bye. And then at Baltimore, week 17, presumably you could already have this division sewed up. So that's not one that I really think is one that you're sweating now for sure. 2 losses to the Niners because Kyle Shanahan owns your coach, but that's fine. And they're the only team guaranteed to play Andy Dalton. So good for them.
That's a thing. Yeah, it'll be, oh my God. I don't even want to think about that yet. We'll get to the Bears eventually, but San Francisco, I think Patrick says, they need to stay healthy, but also we don't really have a good inkling on what they want to do.
Yeah.
The fact that what they did over the offseason, where they traded, where they drafted, speaks volumes about what they think about Jimmy G. He was hurt. He played well at times, but he's been injured a couple times. And I don't know if they're going to make a quarterback switch at some point during the season. It makes it awful hard to read the tea leaves on how the schedule goes. So San Francisco may be the most high variance team out of these.
Yeah, I agree.
Just 'cause I kind of know what I'm getting with Seattle, even though they surprised us. Yeah, they surprised us in the regular season to start last year, where it's like, oh my God, this team is going to be fun. They finally figured out that they're idiots, and then they went back to it. But San Francisco, alt over, alt under. It's like either they bungle this quarterback situation, they take a lot of talent, and they turn out to be last year's Chargers, where it's a lot of talent, but can't quite figure it out. Or they play really well and they make the right choice at quarterback, which I don't know what that is.
Yeah, God, so much more to get to when we get into the team by team previews. I'm pretty fired up. This was a good appetizer, though. Major takeaways, closing thoughts. Yeah,
just like we said at the beginning, this is a great tool. We're going to post these on Twitter. I'll probably put them in a blog just so I can reference back to it, so I can always have that link so you can find it. I'll just say, here's Drew's charts, and that'll be the whole blog, so you can go find them later. And use these to your advantage. But again, like we've pounded over and over again, this isn't just
this isn't an answer key.
No, and like the old. I don't want to dig on another company, but like some of these companies that have. I mean, we use Killer Sports. We were talking about the SDQL, things like that, where you enter a bunch of trends and you overfit it. And it's like, all right, this is a bet on, this is a bet against. You're not using any more context than that. That is the, that's not the way to handle this at all. It's use this as context, use this as, a reason why the line is a certain way, and maybe like we kind of hit on partway through the podcast there, use it as something to realize a team is going to be overvalued or undervalued after the game that we're playing, with the big disadvantage spot, or the Raiders one was a big one where it's like, man, the Raiders are going to have such an advantage. And then they're still a bad team. Like, they still are who they are. The next week they could be maybe you get like KC minus 7.5 to 8.5, where it should be like 10. That if you get that in single digits, just using my power numbers at home, it should probably be like 13 really, but boy, even a 9.5 probably bettable there. I'm curious. I should go look at what the line is for that game right now.
We'll have them available. We'll have them available when we do the team by team previews.
For sure.
We'll get back to that. But you know what? You're right. When a team has a scheduled loss or a scheduled win, be prepared to pounce on the overreaction the following week, because that's maybe the more valuable betting spot than because the market, how the market reacts to this stuff is always more valuable than any situational angle is ever going to be, in my opinion.
I thought I had all the games in some spots. Maybe I don't. There's just week 1. I just have game of the year. I really doubt that's a game of the year. Kansas City. Maybe all the Kansas City games are. Here it is. Ooh. Thursday, November 11th. Oh, it is, because it is on the road. Kansas City minus 8.5.
That's not the right game.
That is not the right game. You're right.
That one, that the Raiders at KC.
At KC?
Week 14, December 12th-ish.
Yeah, that one's not up. We'll have to see. We'll get there. Long way from now. I'm overexcited for that. So,
lot of games left.
If you have any questions, especially if you see something that we missed,
how about that? It is on December 12th. I got the date exactly right. I completely guessed.
Yeah, if you think we missed something, definitely bring that up. For sure, we'd love to hear that, and hopefully you enjoy these.
Absolutely. Best of luck. It's music.
It's the music.